They said my land was basically unused, like it was just sitting there waiting for someone smarter to put it to work. And 3 days later, their entire garage project got shut down before the first shovel hit the dirt. Funny how fast things change when someone decides your property belongs to them more than it belongs to you. So yeah, that spring started off pretty normal. Quiet street, same routines, nothing dramatic. I live in a small town just outside Columbus, the kind of place where people still wave when they drive by, and everyone pretends they know your dog's name. I'd been in that house a little over a decade, long enough to watch trees grow in, fences get replaced, neighbors come and go without much impact. I kept to myself mostly, not unfriendly, just not the type to sit on the porch all day waiting for conversation. Then the Parkers moved in next door. Early April, still a little chill in the mornings, and there they were unloading boxes like they were starting a brand new life. Which, I guess, they were. Daniel Parker, tall, always in some kind of fitted polo like he was ready for a golf meeting at any moment, and his wife, Lindsay, the kind of person who smiles just a little too long, like she's already thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever she's saying. At first, they were exactly what you'd expect. Brought over cookies the second day, oatmeal raisin, still warm, which honestly caught me off guard more than anything. Daniel shook my hand like we were closing a deal instead of just being neighbors. Firm grip, steady eye contact, that practiced confidence you see in guys who negotiate for a living. "We're really excited to be here," he said, glancing around like he was already evaluating the place. "Great neighborhood, lots of potential." That word, potential, I remember it sticking in my head longer than it should have. I thanked them, kept it polite, and that should have been the end of it. Just another neighborly introduction, nothing more. But about a week later, things started to feel off. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just small things. A glance that lingered too long. Daniel standing at the edge of his driveway, looking down the narrow strip of land that ran along the side of my house, my side lot, like he was trying to picture something that wasn't there yet. That strip isn't anything fancy. About 12 feet wide, maybe 90 feet deep, running straight back to the fence line. Gravel in some spots, packed dirt in others, a few storage bins tucked along the fence, seasonal stuff, snow blower in winter, lawn equipment in summer, nothing glamorous, but it served its purpose. And more importantly, it was mine. Bought and paid for, recorded with the county, same as the house. Most people wouldn't look at it twice. Daniel did. Then one Saturday morning, I'm out front grabbing the paper, and my other neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, calls over from across the street. She's lived there longer than anyone. The unofficial historian of the block, notices everything whether you want her to or not. "You have someone working on your side yard?" she asks, squinting like she's trying to confirm a suspicion. I shake my head. "No, why?" She points casually, but her tone shifts just a bit. "Saw a man there yesterday measuring. Had one of those tape reels, walking the whole length." And right there, something in my chest tightened. Not panic exactly, just that quiet alertness you get when something doesn't line up. Because I hadn't called anyone, hadn't given permission, hadn't even thought about doing anything with that strip. I play it off in the moment. Thank her, say I'll check it out, but the second I step back inside, I'm already replaying it, measuring my land, without asking. Later that afternoon, I walked the length of it myself, slower this time, paying attention. And sure enough, faint markings in the dirt, subtle, but there. Little indentations like someone had pasted out, stopped, turned, measured again. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. 2 days later, Lindsay Parker shows up at my door. She's smiling. Of course, same polished expression, but there's something more focused behind it now, like she's not here to introduce herself anymore. She's here with a purpose. "Hey there," she says, leaning slightly into the doorway like we're already comfortable. "I was hoping we could chat for a second." And just like that, I knew exactly what this was about before she even said it. I step outside, close the door behind me, and she gestures lightly toward the side of the house. "So, we're planning to build a detached garage," she begins, voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Nothing crazy, just something functional in the back, but the layout of our lot makes access a little tricky." There's a pause there, just enough for it to feel intentional. "And your side lot," she continues, tilting her head slightly. "Well, it's kind of the only clean path for running utilities back there." I don't say anything yet. Just let her talk. "It's not like you're really doing much with it," she adds quickly, still smiling. We'd only need temporary access, in and out, couple weeks at most. We'd make sure everything is put back exactly the way it was. There it is. Not a question. Not really. More like a suggestion dressed up as a favor. I nod slowly, like I'm considering it, even though deep down, I already know my answer. I'll think about it, I tell her. Her smile widens just a fraction, like she's expecting that to turn into a yes sooner rather than later. Of course, she says, take your time. But the second she walks away, I'm already moving. Because something about the way she said it, like my land was just an inconvenience waiting to be solved, it didn't sit right. Not even a little. That evening, I pull out my property documents, haven't looked at them in years, but I know exactly where they are. Deed, survey map, all of it. Spread it out on the kitchen table, tracing the lines with my finger, confirming what I already know. That strip is clearly defined, legally mine. No shared access, no easements, nothing ambiguous. Still, I don't leave it there. The next morning, I make a call. Not to them, not yet. To a licensed surveyor. If they were already measuring my land without asking, then I figured it was time to make the boundaries a little harder to ignore. And that's where things really started to shift. So the next morning, I didn't overthink it, didn't sit around wondering if I was being too cautious or reading too much into things. I just acted. Called a licensed surveyor out of Franklin County, a guy named Mark Delaney. Came highly recommended, no nonsense. Been doing boundary work longer than most people have lived in this neighborhood. When I explained the situation, he didn't sound surprised, not even a little. Just said, you'd be amazed how often this happens when new folks move in and start seeing opportunity where lines already exist. That word again, opportunity. Funny how it always sounds good until it's pointed at something that's yours. Mark showed up 2 days later in a dusty pickup, orange vest, equipment in the back that looked like it belonged in a science lab more than a suburban yard. We walked the strip together, and I could tell within about 30 seconds he'd already spotted the same signs I had, maybe more. He crouched down at one point, brushed aside some gravel, and just nodded to himself. Someone's been pacing this out, he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Not professionally, but deliberate. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. We spent most of that afternoon going through it properly. Tripods set up, laser lines, measurements taken down to the inch, and then the markers. Bright orange stakes driven deep into the ground at every corner, every interval, every place where ambiguity could try to sneak in. By the time Mark was done, that narrow strip of land looked less like an afterthought and more like a statement, clear, visible, undeniable. And I'll be honest, standing there looking at those markers, I felt something shift inside me too. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Like whatever this was about to turn into, I wasn't going to be passive in it. But I didn't stop there. That same week, I went down to the county planning office. Small building, beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed just enough to remind you you're in a government space, and I filed a formal land use declaration. Nothing flashy, nothing aggressive, just documentation. Noting that the side lot was actively used for private storage, seasonal equipment, ongoing personal use. Paperwork stamped, recorded, entered into the system. It sounds boring, and it is, but that's kind of the point. Because in situations like this, the quiet moves are the ones that matter. I didn't tell the Parkers any of this. I didn't need to. A few days went by, calm on the surface. Daniel still waved when he saw me. Lindsay still smiled like everything was moving along exactly as she expected. And maybe, in their minds, it was. Maybe they assumed I'd come around. That I'll think about it meant I just need a little time to say yes. Then the permit went in. I found out about it the same way most things travel in a neighborhood like ours, not through official channels, but through conversation. Mrs. Alvarez again, leaning over her fence like she always does, voice lowered just enough to make it feel important. Heard your neighbors are building something big, she said, eyebrows raised. Garage in the back. Contractor's been by twice already. I nodded, kept it neutral. Yeah, they mentioned something. She studied me for a second, like she was trying to read what I wasn't saying, then gave a small shrug. Well, city's been cracking down on permits lately. Should be interesting. Interesting. That word stuck with me the same way potential had, because I already knew what was coming. See, when the Parkers submitted their plans, they didn't include any alternative access routes. Everything, and I mean everything, depended on that strip of land along my house. Utility lines, equipment access, construction path, it all ran straight through property that wasn't theirs. And more importantly, property they had no legal right to use. No easement, no agreement, no consent, just assumption. 3 days later, I got the confirmation, not from them, of course, but from the system they had to go through. The county planning office flagged the application almost immediately. It didn't even make it past initial review. Denied. Not delayed, not pending, denied. I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly, at least. But there's a certain kind of quiet satisfaction that comes when things play out exactly the way they should, not because you forced it, but because you understood the rules before someone else tried to bend them. That afternoon, Lindsay showed up again. No cookies this time. No extra warmth in her tone. Just a knock, sharper than before. I opened the door, and for a second, neither of us said anything. Her expression had changed, still controlled, still composed, but the friendliness had been replaced with something tighter, something closer to frustration. "We ran into an issue with the permit," she said finally, getting straight to it. I leaned slightly against the doorframe, casual, giving her space to explain. "They're saying the access route crosses your property," she continued, like this was all just a misunderstanding waiting to be cleared up. "There must be some kind of confusion in the records." I let that hang there for a second. "There's no confusion," I said calmly. Her jaw shifted, just slightly. "Well," she pressed, "we were under the impression that wouldn't be a problem." "Based on what?" I asked, not aggressive, just direct. That's when the mask slipped a little. "It's a narrow strip of land," she said, a hint of edge creeping into her voice. "You're not exactly developing it." There it was again, that same idea wrapped in different words. I nodded once slow. "It's still mine." Silence. You could almost feel the conversation recalibrating in real time. "We just need temporary access," she said, trying to pull it back, soften it. "This doesn't have to turn into something bigger than it is." And maybe, for a different person, it wouldn't have. But I thought about the measuring tape, the uninvited footsteps, the assumption that they could plan around my property before even speaking to me. So I kept my voice even. "I'd suggest talking to the planning office," I told her. "They'll explain your options." Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary. Searching, maybe, for some sign that I'd bend, that this was negotiable. She didn't find it. "All right," she said finally, the word clipped, controlled. "We'll do that." And just like that, she turned and walked back down the driveway, posture stiff, steps a little faster than when she arrived. I watched her go, not with satisfaction, not exactly, but with a kind of calm certainty. Because at that point, it wasn't about winning. It was about boundaries, and whether people respected them, or learned the hard way that they couldn't ignore them. Over the next couple weeks, things shifted in ways you could feel without anyone saying it out loud. The Parkers weren't as quick to wave anymore. Daniel stopped lingering at the edge of the driveway. Conversations, when they happened at all, were shorter, more transactional. But behind the scenes, I knew they were scrambling. Contractors coming and going, new measurements being taken, this time on their side of the property line. Different layouts, different plans. Because once that permit got denied, they had two choices: find another way, or stop entirely. And people like Daniel Parker, they don't stop. They adapt, even if it costs them. And from what I heard, it did. Extra excavation on the opposite side of their lot, rerouting utilities, redesigning the entire structure to fit a space that was never their first choice. Weeks added to the timeline, thousands added to the budget. All because they built their plan around something that was never theirs to begin with. And the thing is, they could have avoided all of it. All it would have taken was a different approach. A real conversation. Respect instead of assumption. But by the time they realized that, it was already too late. And that's the part people don't always understand. It's not the big confrontations that define situations like this. It's the small decisions at the beginning. The ones that seem harmless until they aren't. By the time summer started settling in, you could feel the difference without anyone needing to point it out. The street hadn't changed. The houses were the same trees, same rhythm of lawn mowers on Saturday mornings. But that easy, neighborly air, it had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way that would make a good story at a barbecue. Just enough that you noticed it when you stepped outside and realized people weren't quite looking at each other the same way anymore. The Parkers project didn't stop, like I figured it wouldn't. Guys like Daniel don't walk away from plans, they just reroute them, Adjust until reality fits what they want, or at least something close enough to call a win. And to his credit, he did exactly that. Work started up again about 2 weeks after the permit denial. Different crew this time, different equipment, everything happening on the far side of their lot, the side that didn't touch mine. It wasn't as clean, not as convenient, and from the looks of it, not nearly as cheap. I'd see delivery trucks trying to angle their way through tighter space, hear the occasional frustration in the voices of the contractors when something didn't line up the way it would have if they'd had that straight shot down my side. But they made it work. They always do. One afternoon, I was out back organizing some of my equipment. Nothing exciting, just moving things around, getting ready for the season, when Daniel finally walked over. First time since everything happened. No way from a distance this time, no casual pretense. Just a direct approach, hands in his pockets, that same controlled confidence, but thinner now, like it had been worn down just a bit. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet away from the property line, not crossing it. "Not anymore." "Hey," I replied, keeping it neutral. There was a pause, not awkward exactly, just deliberate. Like both of us knew this conversation had been coming, we just hadn't decided when. "Project's back on track," he said, glancing past me toward the side lot. Those orange markers still standing exactly where they'd been driven weeks ago. "Took some adjustments." "I noticed," I said. Another pause. He shifted his weight slightly, then looked back at me. "Cost us more than we expected." I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wasn't sure what he wanted from me in that moment. Sympathy? Acknowledgement? Validation that the situation had been unfair? Instead, I just nodded once. "That happens," I said. A faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. Not friendly, not hostile, just something in between. "Yeah," he exhaled, almost a quiet laugh. "Guess it does." For a second, it felt like maybe that was it. Just two neighbors stating facts, letting the moment pass. But then he looked back at the strip of land again, my land, and there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Not entitlement, not quite. More like recognition. "You know," he said, slower now, "when we first looked at this place, I saw that strip and thought wasted space. There it was. Out loud this time." I didn't interrupt. He shook his head slightly, almost to himself. Straight line, perfect access, made everything easier in my head. I leaned back against the fence post, arms resting casually, letting him finish. "Didn't really think about it being important to anyone," he added, voice quieter, less polished than I'd ever heard it. And that was probably the closest thing to honesty I was going to get. I let the silence sit for a second, then shrugged lightly. "It's not about how it looks," I said. "It's about what it is." He nodded, slow, thoughtful. "Yeah," he said, "I see that now." Another pause, longer this time. Then, almost as if he was debating whether to say it, he added, "Lindsay thought you were being difficult." I couldn't help it. I smiled just a little. "I figured," I said. He let out a short breath, somewhere between a chuckle and a sigh. "She's not used to people saying no." "Most people aren't," I replied. That one landed, you could tell. He looked at me again, really looked this time. Not assessing, not calculating, just seeing. "Well," he said finally, straightening up slightly, "for what it's worth, you played it right." I didn't say thank you. Didn't say anything, actually, because it wasn't about playing anything. It was about knowing where the line was and not letting someone else decide it for you. He gave a small nod, like that settled something in his own mind, then turned and walked back toward his yard, stopping just briefly before stepping fully away. "Still think it could have been a great garage," he added over his shoulder, almost joking now. I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm sure it would have been." And that was it. No handshake. No apology. No big resolution moment like you'd see in a movie. Just two people who understood the situation a little better than they had before. The garage got finished by late summer. Smaller than what they originally planned, positioned differently, a little awkward from certain angles, but functional. People driving by probably wouldn't notice the difference. But I did, and I'm pretty sure they did too. As for the side lot, nothing changed. Still 12 feet wide, still running straight back to the fence line, still holding the same equipment, the same quiet purpose it always had. The orange markers eventually faded, got pulled out once everything was settled, but the line itself, that stayed exactly where it was. Clear, defined, respected. And here's the thing. I've thought about it more than I probably should have. Not the permit, not the construction, but that moment at the beginning. The measuring tape, the assumption, the idea that something only matters if it's being used in a way other people understand. Because I get it, from the outside, it probably did look like wasted space. But ownership isn't about optics. It's not about maximizing every inch or proving value to the people around you. It's about the simple fact that it's yours, and that should be enough. Now, I will say this, because I know how these things sound depending on who's listening. Some people on this street think I made it harder than it needed to be, that I could have just let them use it, saved everyone time, saved them money, kept things friendly. And maybe they're not wrong. Maybe there was a version of this where I said yes, where everything went smoother, where we ended up being the kind of neighbors who borrow tools and share beers on the weekend. But that version starts with them asking differently, not assuming, not measuring first and talking later, not deciding what my land was worth before I even had a say in it. Because once that line gets crossed, literally or otherwise, it's a lot harder to pretend it doesn't matter. So yeah, things are civil now. We nod when we see each other, exchange the occasional morning if we're both outside at the same time. No tension, no open conflict, just a quiet understanding that wasn't there before. And honestly, I'm fine with that. Because at the end of the day, nobody gets to decide the value of what's yours except you. Not your neighbors, not their plans, not their timelines. You. And if you've ever been in a situation like this, where someone tried to treat your space, your time, your boundaries like they were negotiable, I'm curious how you handled it. Would you have let them use the land, just to keep the peace? Or would you have done exactly what I did and drawn the line before someone else erased it for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you think, and I want to hear where you land on this, because I've seen people argue both sides pretty strongly. And if you're into stories like this, real situations, real decisions, the kind that don't always have a clean right or wrong, stick around. There's always another line somewhere, and not everyone respects it until they have to.